Paramount's engrossing new drama series Happy Face is inspired by the murders of the real-life Happy Face killer, Keith Hunter Jesperson, but the series is not necessarily striving for point-by-point accuracy. The series focuses on his daughter Melissa, and the impact that his horrific crimes had on the lives of her loved ones, his victims, and their families. The show is based off the real autobiography and subsequent podcast of Jesperson's actual daughter, Melissa Moore, so there are plenty of first-hand details littered throughout the show's steadily progressing plot. It was clear by the end of episode 2 of Happy Face that the show's main story arc was not going to stick entirely to the facts. It's important to note that the drama series is only inspired by the real people, places, and incidents surrounding Keith Jesperson. It is not intended to be a retelling of events. Virtually all characters based on real people have had their names changed, and as a result, it can be difficult to parse out what scenes are based in reality and which are dramatizations created solely for the sake of making good television. For anyone watching Happy Face, it's important to remember that the modern-day plot of the show is fictional. There was never a mysterious, unresolved ninth murder, so everything spinning off from that central concept is mostly untrue. However, the plot does mix in a number of real details as it unravels its mystery, exaggerating some and holding to the truth with others. For example, Melissa really did find her father killing cats in the manner she describes to the guests at Dr. Greg's dinner party at the beginning of episode 3. However, there was never any media frenzy, complete with a trending hashtag, surrounding the imprisonment of a man wrongly convicted for one of Keith's murders. That idea is somewhat based in reality, as a young couple falsely confessed to Keith's first confirmed murder, which prompted him to begin writing the smiley-face signed letters to the media and police that earned him his menacing moniker. Similarly, the real Melissa did go on a circuit of talk shows discussing her father's crimes and their impact on her life, but at no point was it related to a ninth murder. In episode 3 of Happy Face, Ivy pores over dozens of unread letters from Keith that Melissa had stockpiled through the years, hoping to find a confession about the ninth murder, as Keith had hinted to Melissa may exist in the letters. In reality, Keith Jesperson was and still is a prolific letter writer, and his daughter Melissa does have many letters from him saved. However, many of them remain unread, and those that have been read are typically vetted by her husband first to keep her insulated from his most diabolical ravings, per her Happy Face podcast. The subplot about Melissa's high school-aged daughter Hazel and her fascination with her grandfather is almost entirely fictional. In reality, Melissa Moore's daughter Aspen learned about her grandfather when she was 10, not as a high school student as she does in the show. She has never desired any sort of relationship with her grandfather, and never developed a fascination with his art as Hazel does. It was likely included in the show as a representation of Melissa's fears about her father, that in the course of manipulating her he could poison her family's lives as well. Melissa's meeting with the son of her father's victim was very different. She did have a face-to-face, but it was far more controlled and pleasant. The scene in episode 3 that shows Ashton McBride, the son of Keith Jesperson's final victim, attacking his mother's killer, portrayed by Dennis Quaid, in court is not quite as dramatic as the show makes it out to be. The real son of his final victim, Julie Winningham, Don Findlay, did in fact confront him in court and called for the death penalty. Likewise, the real Melissa Moore did meet with Findlay in person at one point, although it played out far differently than is shown in Happy Face. Per her Happy Face podcast, Melissa Moore claims that producers on a show she was working on, Monster in My Family, helped her set up a meeting with Don. They informed her that he had actually vilified her in his head, and may have intended to harm her at one point, which is likely where the explosive confrontation at her house depicted in episode 3 originated. In reality, Melissa and Don met for the first time at a seaside cafe, and their peaceful conversation began with a tearful hug instead of rage. 1. There is no evidence Keith Jesperson had a secret cell phone. It keeps a line of communication open between Melissa and her father. Happy Face Season 1 EP 3-14. Image via Paramount+. The notion that Keith Jesperson had a secret cell phone that he used to stay in contact with Melissa is likely a pure dramatization for the sake of Happy Face. It's intended to keep the show's two stars in contact, and showcase how Keith was still trying to manipulate Melissa from prison. In reality, Melissa Moore does characterize her post-confession relationship with her father that way, but it occurred far earlier in her life's timeline than depicted in the show. The real Melissa Moore hasn't had meaningful contact with her father in more than a decade.